My name is Regina and I am the COO and partner at Vita HR. I have 29 years of HR experience.
I'm Holly Nels. I am a regional HR manager with Vita HR. I have been in management for 15 years of my life and an actual HR role for the past 6 years of my life.
And this is HR Stew.
Is HR evil?
To get today's discussion started, I thought I would read what the internet has to say about this. Quora is a popular forum where users can ask questions and qualified and unqualified people can respond and vote for the best answers. So a Quora user asked, "Why does HR have a reputation for being evil?" User Alana Blackthorne says, "People think they are employee advocates, but they certainly are not. They do management's bidding 100% of the time. If management does you wrong, they will defend management in court. They will never, ever take your side. Unless that person is the CEO. They do management's dirty work. That's why they're so disliked. Source, I have 20 years of HR experience."
Well, isn't that interesting that that's the perspective there? It's painful to hear that, right? Because no one knows what goes behind the scenes, the conversations, the advocacy that happens. HR has a job to do. Depending on the organization you're working for, that depends on how much authority, responsibility, accountability you have in that role. So it's tough because that's personally happened to me where people will say, like, "Oh, well, I thought you were on our side, or I thought, you liked me, or I thought we were friends, and we weren't friends. But how could you do this to me?" And it's like, you didn't know how much I did to try to have an outcome that I thought was fair. And sometimes it's not our decision, but at the end of the day, we have bills to pay and we have to do our job.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting because the job of HR is to not be an advocate of either, right? It's to be unbiased, but we are human, we are people. We have opinions, we try to keep it to ourselves, but we're also abused and undervalued and all the things, that other employees are feeling is happening to us as well, So.
Yeah. And abused by having to make those tough decisions that you're like, that's not really the route that I would want to go or hope to go. But ultimately, it's again, not our decision.
Yeah, it's also interesting because I still to this day, and I have terminated or laid off at this point in my career, I bet you it's over 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Right? I mean, it has to be, especially with layoffs.
And COVID.
And COVID. And I especially layoffs. I mean, because that's, sometimes it's political. You don't know why the decisions are being made, right? Why? Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not obvious why someone is laid off and somebody isn't, right? And sometimes you're not even asked. Sometimes you don't even have a seat at the table, even though you should.
Yeah.
But I have, even for people that are justified in a termination, I have never not felt a little sick to my stomach, and I don't ever actually want to not feel that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a human reaction. Like, you're taking away someone's livelihood. That's not a little thing. And to think that HR, and some people, look, there's good people in every profession, right? So there might be people that really, truly do get off on firing people. That's a reality. But I think most HR people get into HR because they like people. And then they find out that if you like people and you're nice, you're in the wrong career.
Yeah. I have one of those hopeful mentalities of if I'm terminating someone for cause, and on their own accord, if I'm terminating someone, I just want to think to myself, this wasn't the right path for them. This wasn't the right position for them. And they're going to leave and go on to, it helps me sleep at night, but they're going to leave and go on to, this spectacular career that was meant for them, that they thrive in, they're successful in, they enjoy to go to work every day. So that's what helps me get through those ugly things.
I think that's helpful, but the hard reality is sometimes people don't recover.
Right.
Sometimes you take away an opportunity and doors are closed on people. They actually had, and I can't remember the official name of this was, but I remember watching it because I'm from Long Island. It was hard times on Long Island, or I can't remember the name of it, and it was about all these folks that got laid off after the financial crisis, right? And there was this one guy, he was a VP, he was super successful, and he went on interview after interview after interview. They profiled like 5 different people. And I looked him up on LinkedIn like years after, and he never got his career back.
Oh, wow.
And this is someone that worked for 30 years, like rose, and so I don't know. I think sometimes just that weighs on you. I just think the heaviness sometimes of some of the things we have to carry out.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's painful.
Yeah.
And it's not as painful as it is to the person you're doing it to. So I'm not taking that away, but still it weighs on you. I've had sleepless nights. I've had anxiety over terminations or some of the political things that you see it coming, and you try.
Yeah.
To derail the train, but you only have so much power. Yeah, yeah.
Another user by the name of Jane Lee said, because general employees think that they can rely on HR to protect them when they encounter a workplace bullying issue. However, they then realize HR is not there to protect them, the little people, but to protect the interests of the company and the management, which are usually the cause and source of workplace bullying issues. So as a general employee myself, I also ask the question, what can HR do for us?
Well, I'll start again. Sorry, I'm going to keep on talking. It's interesting because we do get claims of bullying, and we investigate it. Is there a witness? Can we validate it? I mean, the other person that they're claiming has done these things also has rights, right? So sometimes people use the word bullying, and they're not being bullied. It's the same thing with hostile work environment. People say, this is a hostile work environment. They don't understand the definition of a hostile work environment.
They're trying to use those key HR terms. Yeah.
Right. So, I think that most companies, most HR people would take a bullying claim seriously, but there has to be proof. I think there's some just target keywords that are just overused to make a point or to get their way. Right, get a desired outcome that they would like. They don't like somebody, so they want us to get rid of that person for them. And when we don't do that because we don't have the evidence to carry that out, then we're, evil.
Well, and you do need that evidence. I don't want somebody to come into the office and say, hey, Holly said this to me, and there were no witnesses around, no cameras, no nothing. And then, I get written up or terminated or something as a professional, and all because of what one person had to say, just because they're mad at me because of I walked in with pink shoes
reasons,
today.
Right. Any number of reasons. I mean, but look, I'm not saying that every HR person knows how to deal with these situations. What kind of training have they had? Because you don't learn how to deal with bullying in college or by getting a certification class. So also, I mean, it's the same thing. You hear the same things in schools, right? Like the teachers, how terrible the teachers are. They're not dealing with this stuff. But what resources and what support are they given to be able to handle these situations? I would say is also just another thing that we have to just keep on looking at. It's serious. We know that bullies exist. There's a lot of them, especially in corporate America. Sometimes the more you bully, the higher you rise. That's just the reality sometimes, because people don't want to speak up. But I guess that's what I'm going to say about that comment. We're not union representatives, so it's not about, being an advocate for the employee. It's about having a fair outcome.
And doing your job to make sure you're gathering all the correct data, the correct information, the correct facts to obtain a fair outcome for both sides.
Correct. And then having that data, if something else was to happen, that then you could act on, right? So no one ever talks about that. Like, we spend a lot of time doing documentation. It's not fun, but it's in case.
Yeah.
It's, okay, so if this is going to be actionable in the future, we have this to reference.
So, building off of those answers and just the general idea that HR is evil, I wanted to talk about how people often forget that even though you're an HR professional, you're also human and you're also a person with feelings, because people obviously forget about that. So, how do you, as an HR professional, remain calm and collected, but also bring that human aspect and remind your coworkers that you are also a human?
I think sometimes during conversations with me and employees, I might lean on, not too personal, but a personal aspect or something that I've experienced in my career and my profession and my growth process to kind of, I've been in your shoes. I understand where you're coming from. I understand, so I kind of lean on my experiences in life.
I think, well, I don't know. I agree with everything you just said. And that's a great way to actually stabilize a tough conversation as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Like to bring yourself down to like the same situation that this person's encountering. But at the end of the day, I actually don't know if people care if we're human. That's kind of how I feel. And it's, and I think it's changing. I think it is changing. I think there is a greater appreciation for HR. But this is a role that is very much, what are you going to do for me? You're going to find me this person. Are you going to write this person up for me? Are you going to terminate this person? I think it's kind of like nurses as well. And I'm not comparing ourselves with nurses, but it's the same type of thing. Like, someone's like, you have a role and your job is to be there for me.
Yeah.
That's your job.
I don't know that I ever would have thought about it that way, but now that you said it out loud, I'm like, yeah, you're probably right.
And, look, like as adults, where do most adults make friends? At work. And that's almost like off the table for us.
Yeah.
I mean, because no matter what environment we are in, we are representative of the company. Yes. So if something happens, it's really, this has happened to me. I've been at, I had a party at my house that somebody drank way too much and actually started a fight at my party. And I went into work, and I was, the HR director at that company, and there was not anybody else. I was the highest role in HR. And I was speaking to my counterpart in operations, and I was telling her, I was like, I'm really like, actually the guy kind of scared me as well. And I'm not a person that's afraid, but his behavior was so crazy that I was actually a little afraid of actually holding him accountable for that behavior in the workplace, because it was outside of work.
Right.
And it was just interesting it was somebody that was problematic, for this manager. And I didn't really think about that when I was talking about this experience. And she harped on it like, oh, he needs to be terminated. This needs to happen. You need to do this. You need to do that, And when I was like, hold on, wait a minute, and then I was like, well, I am never inviting anybody to my house again.
Right.
That was the outcome for me. But it does take that off the table. Like, it is really difficult to form friendships at work when you know that you may need to have a tough conversation or possibly terminate somebody or write somebody up or any number of unpleasant things that you have to do sometimes, to witness in HR when you have a relationship with someone that is friendly, that does take your unbiasedness, that's not the right word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Out of the picture. You want to advocate for somebody because you like them. And that's not fair, and that's not right, and that's not what HR's role is. So
these are all facts.
It's difficult. It's difficult. There's a lot of situations, especially as a young professional in HR. I worked for a .com back in the day when they still were bringing kegs in on Friday. And there was just a lot of learning from those experiences of what not to do and what to do and what not to do. But I did learn from that experience, like, wow, it is really a conflict sometimes for me to be present at this stuff because, one, I don't really want to hear when I'm walking in the room, oh, HR's here, oh, like, really?
I get the,
really?
The black hearse, HR is here, pulling up with my black car.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, you do have a black car.
I do have a black car, but it's not a hearse. You have a black car, too.
I do.
Can't tell you how many times there are times when I'm like thinking in my head, I come here for good too. Like, I'm currently working on getting everybody raises, doing comp analysis, reevaluating different things. I come for good.
That's all the behind the scenes things that people do not consider, that we're looking at. How do I make things better? How do we attract better talent? How do we retain the people that we have? How do we find out what people really want and need. How do we make this the best workplace? HR is tasked with that stuff. A lot of times they're not the ones communicating the end results of those things.
Yes.
Right? So that's another interesting thing. Like, it's just, there's so much involved in HR that people do not take into account. Just because one situation didn't go the way that you thought it should, now we're evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, some companies, HR does do the evil things because management is weak.
Very true.
Don't tell me that ever HR should be doing a termination that a manager is not present at.
Very true. Very true.
Unless it's there's reasons sometimes. So if there's hostility between them, then absolutely. But for a regular termination, one, an employee should never be blindsided, and we've seen that too many times, right?
Yes.
They know it's coming, and then they don't know what's coming. Yes. You can tell by their face. They're surprised.
And then you're the only person in the room without the manager, and they're like, what? Why? Huh? And yeah, I'm like, I don't know either.
So in this next segment, we are answering the hard-hitting questions that people have for HR professionals. While oftentimes employees should be looking to their internal HR reps, sometimes the situation is more complicated. This week we have a question from a user on the subreddit AskHR. The anonymous user writes, so a little bit of background. Earlier this year, I was working at a job that I had been at for about 18 months. Really liked it and it was a good job. My boss is cool and there was a few red flags, manager being aggressive, nepotism, etc. But it was all very minor and tolerable. There was one week, through a string of unfortunate changes, I became upset with my employer. This same week, one of my managers from my former employer contacted me to apply for a job. I really enjoyed working with this manager. Since I was a little down and all the things were changing at my current job, I said screw it and applied. I knew another coworker who worked there part-time, and I wanted to get a feel for the possible new place, so I asked the coworker what they thought about it, and they said it was a good place to work. Fast forward. I had now taken an interview and was waiting to hear back when my current boss found out that I had taken the interview.
Uh-oh.
And that I had spoken to another coworker about the job, and I was let go because of this.
Ooh.
Then I didn't get the job that I interviewed for.
Oh, snap.
I ended up spending a few weeks job hunting and interviewing at a few companies, and then I ended up accepting a job last month that I was very excited about. This employer provides a boundless opportunity to learn from a very prestigious company in the area, which is great. The company is a little old school, so I had to make some changes to my wardrobe and hours I was used to, but all in all, it's been great and came with a raise and great benefits after 90 days.
See, this is like what I was talking about. He got a better opportunity.
Is he done?
No, there's
Okay,
more.
okay.
Let me be
There's
hopeful
more.
for a minute.
Okay.
However,
Oh.
recently, I've realized that it's an odd place to work. The company is so short-staffed right now. Pandemic, yay!
Yay.
And my direct manager is taking that staffing shortage very hard and is reacting poorly to it. For example, the small portion of the company that I work for has about 6 employees, and we really need 8 to 10. Last night my manager snapped at a coworker to a point where my manager almost broke something, and it really scared me. My coworker seemed fine, but I'm not sure if it was a one-time event or not. So question, should I write it out, or should I give up the killer benefits and get out of this possibly toxic workplace ASAP? Also, if the answer is to get out, is it bad taste to call one of those jobs that I turned down and ask if they are still looking to bring someone on board?
Well, first, I'm going to say only he or she can answer that question. We can't, what's intolerable to one person is different to somebody else, right? So I think it's always best practice to be looking for a job when you have a job.
Agreed.
I think it's harder when you don't have a job. So if you can stick it out, I would always recommend that. But if you're in a situation that is unsafe or or is causing you mental anguish, then I would say no amount of money is worth that.
And I don't think it's a horrible thing to keep in contact with another employer that you had put in a resume and you had, great interviews, etc., to keep in contact a couple months down the road.
That's called networking.
Yes.
It's encouraged, in fact.
They have events all the time. There's LinkedIn. So I don't think it's horrible. I say reach out.
Yeah, definitely. Advocate for yourself, always.
Absolutely.
But I feel like there's this is HR. I feel like there's 5 paragraphs that we don't know. What's not said in this in this story. Anytime I read anything on Reddit, and I'm actually on Reddit quite a bit, I'm always like, okay, this is one version. I wish I could get the other side because something seems missing.
What do you think about that? Okay, wait. I feel like we don't have enough information. Who's to say this guy didn't just leave work for an hour, not clock out, and he just went to an interview down the street? He's like, oh, it's right down the street. Nobody's going to notice.
Your HR is all over the place, Holly. It's all over the place.
We don't have all the data.
It's true. But in general, if it is how he is presenting it, I don't know, is it retaliatory?
Is it retaliatory? Is that...
I mean...
I guess it could be construed as retaliatory. He went to look for a better opportunity for himself and a better job, and he's like, no, I'm done with you. You're gone.
You're fired, and probably we're at will.
I love that statement.
Our favorite.
At will. We don't need documentation. We're at will.
Well, let's see what your lawyer thinks later on. Because upfront work helps. I don't know. Maybe it's not exactly that. But it certainly is in that vein. I think when opportunity presents itself to you, I think it's almost an obligation for you to look into it.
Agreed.
So to hold it against somebody, it's just bad business.
And to be a good leader and a good manager, you would want your employees to thrive. You would want them to be able to go out and be their best selves and achieve their dreams and their career goals. And granted, it hurts a little, it stings a little, but if they're given this amazing opportunity to make more money, to, a promotional opportunity in another organization, why not be excited for those wins for that person as an individual?
Or why not try to keep the person?
True.
You saw this opportunity, how does it make you feel about this job? Try to win them over before they have an offer in hand, right? Because I don't actually believe in counter offers. Like if someone is resigning, if someone actually drafts up the letter and resigns, I actually don't think you should talk someone out of it.
Why?
They made their decision.
True.
So now you get them to stay for 6 months. Maybe you're having the conversation again at that time.
Very true.
It's like, unless you're dealing with a rash personality, which probably don't want them to work for you anyway, honestly. I mean, they went through the whole process. They weighed the pros and cons. They came to their decision. Maybe you could do a temporary stay. Now, there's rare occasions when it does work out. Someone feels unappreciated and they really, and they probably were unappreciated. And then their manager's like, oh, crap. Why? I think all these things all the time about this employee. Why didn't I verbalize that? Why did I show my appreciation? So if they change their methods, this rarely happens, just for the record, maybe it could work out. Because sometimes you're blind. You're busy doing your own things. You have your own problems, and you just think everything's fine. And so, good employees don't get the attention.
Right. I recently had a conversation with a manager about a similar situation like this, and they were discussing with me, all this growth potential that they see in this particular employee and, what plans they have for this employee. I was like, in this market especially, you need to start verbalizing this. I have a succession plan for you. These are my thoughts for you. Right. These are my goals for you. This is what I see in you. Because, recruiters are diving into people's, messages on LinkedIn. Hey,
yeah, they got to make a living.
Yeah. So, you need to verbalize and be as vocal as you can as to where you see this particular person going.
Don't make assumptions that someone knows where they stand or knows what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
Because they don't. And they have their own internal dialogue they're wrestling with.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
So from a different perspective, if a manager came up to you and said, hey, I would like to fire this employee because I've noticed they've been interviewing at other places, how would you reply to that?
Don't do it. What documentation do we have? Is he a poor performer? He or she a poor performer? Are they, have attendance issues? What grounds do we have to terminate? Not just because he's out interviewing for another job.
I agree. Obviously, we make recommendations all the time, and ultimately it's up to the employer to make the decision. But this just seems really petty and unwise, right? Like, what actual reason are you And I don't know, did we have a time frame? Did it say that is this a recent question? Do we know?
We don't know. Asked a month ago.
Oh, was it asked a month ago? So, okay. So in the state of Colorado a month ago, why would someone be cutting staff in this labor market?
Agreed.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
Like that person, if the situation is as presented, and we don't know that's the case, but assuming that it is, that person should not be a manager. Is not equipped to be a manager.
Absolutely. And I, especially right now, I think a lot of people are being promoted in these management roles with no guidance, no help, no leadership training, and they're not meant to be in these roles. And it's good to have HR that a manager feels comfortable. Hey, I need to bounce this idea or this thought off of you and see.
Right. And we're like, go home and sleep on it.
Yes. Said that a lot.
Let's regroup.
Yeah. Or maybe
On
take
Monday.
the weekend.
Yeah. On Monday. When you're not feeling so emotional. And we don't use the word emotional, but it is a factor. I mean, look, when you're stressed and you're understaffed and you feel, a manager is allowed to have certain feelings, right? They're allowed to be hurt and to maybe be slightly irrational. If they come to HR and talk it through rather than acting on it, that's advised. We are therapists. That's part of our job, right? To sit there and listen and say, okay, I totally hear you. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be upset. Wow, you did all these things for this employee. You trained them. You did this. You did that. Actually, but that employee owes you nothing. Right. Because they worked for that stuff, right? I mean, like they were doing their job, right? So, yeah, it's interesting. Like, but I'm going to revert back to my whole, should this guy even be a manager? If he didn't consult with HR, right? Or if he did consult with HR, maybe that HR person is also in the wrong field. Who knows?
We've been around those people before.
Yeah, we sure have.
So this concludes our episode of HR Stew. Thanks everybody for joining us and listening in. I hope you took away some good things from this podcast. We are not all evil. We do have hearts. We do have personalities. We are human. And we try to do what's right based on the facts and information that we've been given.